Imagine the agony of losing your wife and daughter in a brutal murder, only to watch as the world admires the very man who took them away. Do the whispers of justice fade beneath the praises for his brain? This is a story so horrifying it makes you question everything you believe about intelligence, morality, and justice. Can a brilliant mind erase a bloody past? When fear and genius collide, which one wins? This is the story of Edward Rulloff. To understand Edward Rulloff, one needs to start from his childhood days. Was not like other children growing up in 19th century New York. From the moment he could read, he was different. While most kids played with toys and learned basic reading, Edward's brain worked like a super-powered computer. He could pick up books about complex topics and understand them faster than anyone around him. Languages were especially easy for him. But this amazing brain came with a darker side. He could understand things so quickly that he began to see the world differently from everyone else. Rules didn't seem to matter to him. If something stood in his way, he would find a way around it. His intelligence wasn't just about learning. It was about finding ways to get what he wanted, right or wrong. So it's obvious, school couldn't contain him. Traditional learning felt too slow, too boring. Edward wanted to know everything about everything. He studied medicine, law, languages, jumping from one subject to another with incredible speed. Most people would be confused by such a wide range of interests, but not Edward. His brain made connections that others couldn't even imagine. Beneath all this brilliance, something darker was growing. Edward was learning that his incredible mind could be a tool to manipulate, to trick, to get exactly what he wanted. Edward Rulloff started showing early warning signs, and the first real trouble came early. Money was always on his mind, and he didn't care much about how he got it. When most young men were trying to build honest careers, Edward was already finding ways to cheat and steal. The first big warning sign came through a crime called embezzlement. This is a fancy word for stealing money that was supposed to be kept safe. Edward worked in a position where people trusted him with their money, but trust meant nothing to him. He saw an opportunity and took it without thinking twice, but his brilliance couldn't keep him safe for long. His crime came into the light, and he was caught red-handed. However, what was most shocking was the absolute remorse he had towards the situation. He didn't show the kind of shame or guilt most people would. Instead, he was angry about being discovered. His brilliant mind was already working on how to talk his way out of trouble. He could charm people, make up stories that sounded totally believable. Well, this paints the picture of the kind of man he was professionally. But perhaps personally he was different. Well, sadly not. His marriage to Harriet Shutt showed another side of his dangerous personality. At first, everything looked normal, a young couple starting their life together, but those who knew Harriet saw something different. She was scared. Her letters home were careful, filled with hidden messages of unhappiness. People who met Edward noticed how he could change quickly. One moment he could be charming and smart, the next moment, cold and calculating. It was like he had two different personalities living inside one body. The brilliant scholar and the potential criminal were always fighting for control. The year 1845 was a nightmare for Harriet Shutt's family. One day, she and her baby daughter Priscilla simply disappeared. Edward had a simple story that his wife had left him, taking their child with her. But nobody believed him. Harriet's family knew something was wrong. She was not the type of woman who would leave without telling anyone. Her letters and conversations made it obvious how much she loved her family. Her suddenly vanishing made no sense. But proving something had happened was almost impossible, because sadly, back in the days, police didn't have the same tools they have today. No DNA tests, no advanced forensic science, just basic detective work and people's memories. Investigators tried their best. They talked to neighbors, checked Edward's story, and looked for any small clues. But Edward was too smart. He had covered his tracks perfectly. No bodies were found. No clear evidence of a crime could be proven. Not knowing was the worst part. Harriet's family lived with constant pain, wondering what had happened to her and the baby. Had she been murdered? Had she run away? Was she still alive somewhere? These questions haunted them for years. Edward seemed strangely calm through it all. While any normal guy would have been upset or worried about a missing wife and child, he acted like nothing had happened. This strange behavior made people even more suspicious. Some people believed Edward had killed them. Others thought he might have hidden them away somewhere. But without proof, he walked free. His brilliant mind had found a way to escape justice. However, once again, the law got to him. That was when Rulloff got suspected for kidnapping and was sent to prison. While most people expected him to suffer in prison for his crime, for Edward, prison became something completely different, almost like a special school where he could study all day long. While other prisoners felt trapped and angry, Edward saw opportunity everywhere. The prison library became his kingdom. He read every book he could find, especially about languages and how humans communicate. Other inmates started to see him as something special, not just another criminal, but a thinking man. He began teaching his fellow prisoners. Imagine a convicted criminal becoming a teacher inside prison walls. Edward used his big brain to help others learn. Guards were amazed. They had never seen a prisoner quite like him before. His linguistic studies continued without interruption. Edward believed he was close to discovering something big about how languages work. He wrote papers, made notes, and developed complex theories about communication. To him, prison wasn't a punishment. It was a research center. Other prisoners respected him, not because he was tough, but because he was smart. He could solve problems, help people, and explain complicated ideas. His intelligence was his real power. During this time, Edward refined his theories about language. He thought he was going to change how humans understand communication forever. Most people would have given up, but not Edward. He saw his time in prison as a chance to think, to plan, to grow. Rulloff had to act fast when authorities started preparing murder charges about his missing wife. Escape became his only option, so he decided to find a partner to execute his next big master plan. With help from Albert Jarvis, a young man he had once tutored, he planned a dangerous flight into the winter landscape. The night was dark, the sky covered with thick clouds that hid the moon. Edward ran, his breath coming out in harsh, ragged gasps. Snow crunched beneath his boots, and the icy wind cut through his tattered coat like a knife. Every step was a battle against the freezing cold. His fingers were numb, his face stung, and he could no longer feel several of his toes. He couldn't stop. Stopping meant death. The prison guards would soon realize he was gone, and once they did, they would come after him with dogs and guns. He stumbled over a frozen branch, barely managing to keep himself from falling. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. He had memorized the map in his head, through the forest, across the frozen river, then onto the abandoned railway. If he could reach the old train station before sunrise, he might just have a chance. Hours passed. Edward's vision blurred, his limbs grew heavy, and exhaustion creeped on him like never before. But finally, in the distance, he saw the dark shape of the station. Relief flooded his body, but he didn't slow down. He had to keep moving. He had to live. The police soon discovered that Edward had escaped from prison and immediately launched a manhunt. Officers questioned the guards, scoured the snowy forests, and set up roadblocks, but it was too late. Edward had vanished without a trace. Every inmate was interrogated, yet no one gave any useful information. Whether out of fear or loyalty, they remained silent. Meanwhile, Harriet Shutt's family, still longing for justice, found no solace. Instead of relief, they felt a deeper sense of fear. Edward was free, and no one knew where he would strike next. Most fugitives would go into hiding, afraid to be seen. But Edward was different. He didn't want to disappear. He wanted to keep living his life, to make something of himself. He changed his name and forged new documents, slipping into society like a ghost. With his brilliant mind, he sought academic positions, believing that intelligence could overshadow his criminal past. Each day was a gamble, but Edward had already faced death. Now he only wanted to survive. It was like a dangerous game of cat and mouse. He would charm interview committees with his incredible knowledge. Sometimes he would get the job, working as a scholar while always looking over his shoulder. His confidence was incredible. Where most criminals would be scared of being caught, Edward believed he was too smart to be stopped. He continued his research, even submitting academic papers under fake names. The winter journey was brutal. Imagine walking for days, your toes already lost to frostbite, knowing that every step could lead to capture. But Edward's mind was always working, always planning the next move. And that was on August 17th, 1870, the day that ended Edward's dangerous journey. Desperate for money, he planned a robbery that would change everything. The target was Halbert & Company, a dry goods store in Binghamton. The plan seemed perfect: use of chloroform to knock out the store's clerks, steal valuable items, and escape quickly. Rulloff thought he had considered every possible problem. But plans have a way of falling apart. Something unexpected happened. One of the clerks woke up during the break-in. Instead of staying quiet, he confronted the intruders with a gun. In that moment of chaos, everything changed. Rulloff fired a shot, killing the clerk to protect his criminal partner. What was supposed to be a smooth robbery turned into a nightmare. The gang tried to escape, but their getaway boat was missed. As they attempted to swim across the Chenango River, two of Rulloff's partners drowned. He was the only one who survived. It was like a crime novel coming to life. A brilliant man, reduced to a desperate criminal, making one fatal mistake after another. The robbery that was supposed to solve his money problems became the event that would ultimately end his life. The newspapers loved the story. The genius killer, they called him. A man who could have been a great scholar was reduced to a common criminal. His brilliant mind, which could have changed the world, was now his greatest weakness. When Edward Rulloff was put on trial, it wasn't like any ordinary court case. This was a show that captured the entire country's attention, and people couldn't get enough of his strange story. Rulloff made an incredible choice. He decided to represent himself in court. Most criminals would want a lawyer, but not Edward. He believed his intelligence was so great that he could argue better than any professional lawyer. His argument was shocking. He told the court that his potential contributions to linguistics were so important that executing him would be a loss to humanity. Some scholars actually agreed with him. They saw him as a tragic figure, a brilliant mind gone wrong. The courtroom became a stage. Edward used all of his charm and intelligence to try and save himself. He talked about his discoveries, making complex arguments that most people couldn't even understand. Some people were impressed by his intelligence. Others saw right through him as a manipulative killer who was trying to use his intelligence to escape punishment. The trial became about more than just the crime. It was about the nature of intelligence and morality. Scholars and scientists watched the trial closely. They were fascinated by this man who could be both incredibly smart, yet more dangerous than an animal. How could someone with such a brilliant mind also be capable of such terrible crimes? Rulloff's final moments were chilling. May 18, 1871 was the day Rulloff would face his final punishment. Thousands of people gathered to watch his execution by hanging. It was like a macabre public event, with everyone wanting to see the infamous genius killer meet his end. When asked if he had any last words, Rulloff's response was chilling in its simplicity. "I can't afford to make a speech," he said. Those words seemed to capture everything about him. Cold, calculated, refusing to show any emotion. It was a moment that would be remembered for years. A man who had spent his life using words, now choosing to say almost nothing. His brilliant mind, which had been his greatest tool and his greatest curse, was about to be silenced forever. The hangman's noose waited. Rulloff walked to it with the same confidence he had shown throughout his entire life. No tears, no begging, no dramatic speeches, just a calm acceptance of what was coming. As he stood on the platform, people in the crowd tried to understand him. How could someone so smart make such terrible choices? His life was a puzzle that nobody could fully solve. When the trapdoor opened, Edward Rulloff's extraordinary journey came to an end. But his story would continue to fascinate people for generations to come. After Edward Rulloff died, something unusual happened. Scientists preserved his brain because it was the largest ever recorded at that time. It remains on display at Cornell University, a permanent reminder of a complex human being. Was Rulloff a misunderstood genius? A monster hiding behind intellectual skills? Or something more complicated? A human whose potential went terribly wrong? His story forces us to ask difficult questions. Can brilliant intelligence exist alongside terrible moral choices? How do some people with amazing talents end up making such destructive decisions? Rulloff wasn't just a simple criminal. He was a linguistic scholar who could have changed how we understand language. He was a man who could charm people and solve complex problems. But he was also someone who could kill without showing real remorse. His brain, preserved in a museum, continues to fascinate researchers. They look for clues about what made him so different. Was there something in his brain structure that explained his unique combination of brilliance and brutality? The legend of Edward Rulloff continues to haunt us. He represents a warning about the complexity of human nature. Intelligence alone is not enough to make someone good or successful. It's the choices we make that truly define us. In the end, Edward Rulloff became more than just a criminal or a scholar. He became a symbol of the thin line between genius and madness, between potential and destruction. That's a wrap. But before you go, please don't forget to watch our previous video on Joseph Weil, who had a very similar story like Edward Rulloff.